Hey kids, welcome back to Tuhon and Son. My name is Ryan Gelina.
And this is Tuhon Philip Gelinas.
Yes, and this is part 2 of our Dan Inosanto spectacular interview.
It was spectacular.
I had to say spectacular twice because it's a two-parter. This is an episode larger than me. We had to divide it up. We wanted every moment to shine. So we ended the last episode on kind of like a cliffhanger and stuff like that. And we're about to reveal some information, some personal, super cool information between Guro Dan and his Sifu, right?
Sifu Bruce Lee.
And Sifu Bruce Lee. He's also trained with Ed Parker. And
he's trained with so many people. He's trained with the Machados. He's trained with Paul de Tuars and Willem de Tuars and Victor de Tuars and Maurice de Tuars. And he's trained with John Lacoste. And
Dan Inosanto is a Kevin Bacon game of martial arts, you know? Like this interconnecting web of Danism.
Anyway, here we are. Part 2.
This is kind of a semi personal question, I suppose. But, unfortunately, when Bruce Lee died, you lost a teacher, you lost a friend.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
When you look back on him, what was the one thing that he told you that, still sticks with you today? Just, that says, I'm proud of what I do, and I'm glad I keep doing it.
Well, for me, I think the proudest moments I remember with him, I think, is that every time I trained with him, I learned a lesson. It was hard in the beginning because I'm older than Bruce Lee. As I said before, I am 5 years older than Bruce Lee. Taki Kimura is 15 years older than Bruce Lee. And James Lee, who was my senior also, he was 20 years older. That's why we were laughing. He says, oh my gosh, we're following a child because we were so much older than him. But he was so much wiser for his age. And you can be mature in one area of your life and you can be immature. And some things, I remember one time he was trying to fix this water faucet. And my Sihing, which is James Lee, looked at it and he says, here's this guy, he's the most talented martial artist around. And he's so good, he's so creative. He says, he can't put the putty on a you have to turn the water faucet off first. You would think of a man. And I just thought that was so funny. But what was so funny, I didn't know that either. Then you realize that he's a human being too. For all his God-given skill, that he had things that he had to work on too. As all of us have things to work on. He could be so mature in one thing, and then I could see him lose his temper or something. Like he couldn't put, I remember this, he couldn't put together Brandon's baby crib together because part A goes to part B and part C. So he took the box and just slammed that part and that part and that part on the floor, and there was just dead silent. And I wasn't saying anything too and then I go, I'll try Sifu. And somehow I put Brandon's crib together. And that's what I remember. And I thought, wow, why would he get so mad because he can't? But that's the best time because I'm terrible at putting things together. My wife will tell you that. I can't put a coffee table together with A part goes in the B part and Paula just, and there's some bookcases and Paula goes, let me put those 4 bookcases together. You take so long.
I find it compelling when you hear about these idols or these people that died young, and you hear all these things that make them seem immortal. But I find it wonderful when you just hear they were humans too. People that are called legends, they're just people.
Yeah.
And hearing about that, humanizing these legends, that's why I find the most compelling about this kind of information.
I think most people are like that. You don't see that other side. If you see the family side, then you can, it's pretty much, you can't find a perfect man because his interests will take him away from his family. I've heard that from so many people. Man, I wish I could be more of my family. But the job vocation or his occupation or his career, and he doesn't want to fall behind. Sometimes he forgets the family. So many times, how many Hollywood stories are about that?
Yeah.
So many, right? There's nobody I think is perfect.
Yeah.
But that's a part of life. I don't think there's ever been in a person. You can because we're constantly learning all the time. I think if you can make everybody human, that were great legends. You go from Jim Thorpe to all they always had problems. Some people go, they don't want to see that part, like if he had trouble with, like, say, drinking. Nobody wants to hear that part. They only want to hear that person in his career and what he did correctly. So you're willing to accept, oh yeah, he used to come stone drunk into the house,
and they don't want to hear. It's like, oh, one day he like built a cradle for his baby, and it's like, oh, that's boring, man. Tell me about when he was wasted.
So I think that's normal. I think for everybody,
a certain perception. It's like, I know him. I saw his movie. If you want to know his facts, ask me.
Actually, it's funny because, the irony of it all is that when you hear that story, you think this is actually a real, true image of somebody who's been postulating this idea of there is no way. The way is no way. So I should be able to read this stupid set of instructions and do it the way I want. But that didn't work that way. This way has to go the way it says. Otherwise, the result that you're looking for, because you're not looking for a result of your choosing, you're looking for a result of their choosing, and that happens to be this crib. Now, the fact is, B didn't go into D, it went into C.
So he was trying to G-Kendo the crib, is what you're saying.
He was trying to G-Kendo the crib, and the crib was resisting. It didn't want to go that way. So, yeah, which is very funny because I can sort of relate to this. There are times when I will have technical gear because I buy a lot of junky technical gear. And I'll think to myself, well, if I press enough buttons, maybe I can get it to work. I have a lot of stuff that I've never been able to use as a result of this. Because, unfortunately, technical gear has to work the way they say it has to work. You have to turn it on the way it says, and you have to progress to the point of it working. Otherwise, it won't work. But you can always imagine it might. But, and unfortunately, your imagination is not always going to be a successful result. So that's a life.
Like I said before, you're a martial artist who sometimes does other things. What do you do for fun that's non-martial arts related?
Well, I like playing drums. I'm a terrible drum player, but I take a drum lesson once a week with some of my students. I sometimes take it with Joel or anybody that has any free time that that takes it. But I enjoy learning how to play drums. And we have some good drummers that come to our academy. They train, like Alex Acuna is one. Michael, he's another good drummer. And so that's what I'd like to do for fun. And then I like to take hikes, but not at a speed. I'd like to just casual walk, enjoy the scenery. And then I like to listen to music.
What music do you listen to?
I listen to everything. I just put the earphones on and...
Yeah, but you'd be a huge hypocrite if you're like, I like metal. Everything else sucks. It goes against your whole philosophy of stuff you just said.
Yeah, I just like to listen to everything, I learned that from my sister, too. I never liked classical music, and my sister was into classical piano playing, as is her daughter. So I got to like it. I never liked it, and then later on I was going, wow, this is pretty good. Some people, like my wife's into country and western. She can name all the artists. But I like the music.
Were you she and Presley? You're training at the Grand Ole Opry?
She was there. She was there.
Oh, she must have been freaking out then.
Yeah.
That's cool. She must have been like, oh, and Elvis was standing here, and Johnny Cash was standing over here. It was great.
Yeah, she's been around the martial art a long time. My wife, and she's a great martial artist, in my opinion, and helped me a lot. I remember even organizing my charts. I would write them down and say, no, you got to teach this one because this is less complicated. Just start from the simple to go to complex. And I go, yeah, she's right. So a lot of times my charts, in the order of my charts, all my students help me change what I call curriculum that never stays constant. If you teach something, and some people seem to do that other movement first, sometimes I change the number. So that can be number
Some
one.
of us have recognized that fact.
Yes, so I go, all right,
quietly kept it to ourselves.
So if he keeps on doing that as number two, I better make it number two because he's constantly going into that. So you can do that. Your students help you change the arrangement in which you teach.
And what's your favorite movie? Just things about you that I was looking on Wikipedia. I'm like, it says none of this.
I really don't have I have many favorite movies. I like The Longest Day.
Okay.
People say, well, that's a military picture, but I like that because there's more things in military tag. I like Patton. Even Saving Private Ryan, I thought
you like military movies.
But then I like love stories, too.
Okay.
But I just don't want to see people see me cry in it. But I like comedies. Sometimes I don't like those spooky movies, but then I go, let me watch it a little bit. And then you might get to like it. Yeah.
But what's really interesting is how California, mean, not only were you a dedicated martial artist who happened to run into some of the most amazing people available in your area, California was also this incredible melting pot and focus for all of these things. I mean, being the fact that it was Hollywood in Los Angeles, people were drawn to be there. They all wanted to be in the movies because by being in the movies, magical things could happen to their lives. But at the same time, you had all these people who knew that they wouldn't necessarily be stars in those movies, but they could be something. And that life gave a phenomenal lifestyle to an awful lot of people. So you had, amazing martial artists who came. And so an awful lot of them, because of the strength of the name of your academy, you must have seen hundreds of amazing people come by and join, even for a couple of weeks, your school. I mean, do you have any stories about those kinds of people?
The names I can name, because I'm not supposed to be naming different people because sometimes
No, I'm not.
But there have been people who that have come to the academy and train, and pretty well known. And then usually we try to keep it so people won't bother them. Sometimes they stay as a student, and they might stay for the length of maybe on a feature movie that they're working on. So there's been so many people like that, It
was more kind of an acknowledgement that a phenomenal amount of martial arts was going on in Southern California. I mean, you had really, really great martial artists who were great martial artists because they trained really hard, but you had also great martial artists who were brought there by circumstance and by design, because you'd have these guys just coming in, I mean, from all over the world. You had the Jackie Chans of the world who were coming in there. You had, Bruce Lee that originated, of course, in Seattle, then went to Oakland, and then went to Los Angeles because of that attraction. You had all these people, and it must have been amazing. Never mind being as good as you are, but just to see all these people, and it's not saying that everywhere else is a backwater, but if you're just in your school, wherever the heck that may be, you may run into one or two really phenomenal people, but it must be amazing when you see people who are driven, motivated, and occasionally really well trained on top of everything else. And they come in, and then usually it's not so much even teaching them, it's just sort of like, here, I'll tweak this and I'll tweak that. And they start going, wow, that was amazing. That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And meanwhile, all you're going is going, hey, you already had that ability. All I did was, tell you to, speak into the mic.
All you had to do was believe.
Who was that kid who didn't have a ride home one night and you had to take him all the way to?
Oh, that is Forrest. I was going to say Forrest Gump. Forrest Whitaker.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he was used to be my student, and then Jeff Amata trained him for a couple of movies.
Forrest Whitaker.
He did a good job on The King of Scotland.
I like how you say kid, but he was huge.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
Trained with you? How old would you say?
I think, I'm not quite sure, but I think maybe 13 or 14 or 15.
So you're still taller than me, is what you're saying. Yeah.
So it's so hard for me to remember. But he remembers the story. I guess I took him home because his parents didn't come to pick him up, so I took him home.
Aw, what a nice guy.
I think from the academy there's been a wealth of good stuntmen that have come through there. I think Eric Paulson could have gone that Hollywood route.
Speaking of Eric Paulson,
but,
we have a little funny story about Eric Paulson, don't we? About the whole gang hanging out. Where it was funny. You guys are like this comedic duo where you're the quiet, like, okay, guys, and he's the big obnoxious one. He would keep pile driving you. No, you keep suplexing you onto the bed.
Yeah, he likes to work out.
Yeah, and then he, when we went into the hotel room, he immediately just hid behind the curtain for absolutely no reason. And then he suplexed me, and well, you tell the story, Dan. It's funnier when you tell.
Oh, I remember that. I guess you hadn't. I think I'm just guessing that maybe you were 12 or 13 or 14 or 15.
Young enough for this to be funny.
Yeah, so I remember. I guess you never met him before, and I think your father brought him. The first thing he did was grab you and he'd suplex you on the bed, and you got up and he goes, "So the light heavyweight champion in shoot wrestling is an immature boy." I remember, and that just I thought that was so funny because you were
by a kid for acting mature. It's like the pot calling the kettle black. Yeah, good times.
Eric is probably one of the funniest persons I've ever been with. If someone tries to do what he does, they would be obnoxious. But when Eric does it, it's funny. But if you don't have his personality, it doesn't come off.
Yeah, he's our Eric.
But he's definitely Paulson is definitely talented. He has what I call a photographic memory, I remember taking a seminar with him. We were training with this Brazilian guy in, I think it was Houston, Texas. And I think the guy only taught 5 things. And out of the 5 things, I think I remember 3. And Eric Paulson's mind is so quick that out of the 5 things, he really developed another 8 or another 9. Just, yeah, we could do this, we could do this, and we could do this, and we could do this. And I go, wow, I didn't see that. He's what I call a good innovator. He can take the same material and change it and make it better sometimes.
Years ago, I guess in 81, it wasn't more like 82, when we did that week-long seminar in Big Spring, Texas. I met the first few of people, 'cause those guys came down with you, and there was guy Alphonse and a few of those other guys were there. And it was like there's this, you get quiet, you're curious. We'd be talking about you and be like, wow, for someone that well-known, he's really a nice guy. How did that work out? And of course, everybody would have their own little take on it. But then there was this little story going around about, well, if you ever want to get into the Inosanto Academy, you have to fill out the form. And then his sister comes down and puts her hand on over the forms. And like, if you don't pass, you don't get in. And it was kind of like, I will never, ever do this. I will never, ever apply to enter the academy because I don't know if I'm good enough, but I don't want to ever be rejected for that reason. I don't care if that's one reason, but it was just funny because there was like this thing going around saying that, this is what happened. If you want to enter the Inosanto Academy, this is the procedure you have to go through. And it was like, I have so much self-doubt. There must be something in my background that will disqualify me. And I'd rather, like, what is it, the old quote from Groucho Marx? I don't want to become a member of any club that would consider having me as a member. Well, it's kind of not quite that bad, but it was funny because it was just like, you're going like, what? You have to do what?
They told that story, really?
Oh, yeah. That was
that's not really true, but I don't know where that story comes from.
Well, I suppose like anything else, there's probably one kernel of truth. Like, it's your academy. That was true. Yeah. And, other than that, it doesn't matter because people have a tendency of making up stories, but, there's people like me willing to believe them.
I think where that came from was that when my father took me to Illustrisimo, he says, bring your son here. And he put his hand on my head like this. And he put it on my head, which seemed to be like 30 seconds. And we lifted up. He says, I'll teach him. And I said to my dad, when we left Illustrations, I said, what was that all about, Dad? And he said, well, if you had heat, he wasn't going to teach you. I said, what if I had a fever? And my dad goes, it's not about that. But I'll tell you something even funny with Illustrisimo, right? So Illustrisimo was after I started studying with him for a while. He opens his leg and there's this tattoo prayer on his leg. It's a San Miguel and there's a prayer of St. Michael on the leg. And he goes, my brother gave this to me. He's talking about Malicia Illustrisimo. One of the teachers of Tating Illustrisimo, because the Reginos and Malicia both taught Tating Illustrisimo in the Philippines. And it was so funny. And he goes, you will finish my course, I'll give you the tattoo. So we're walking away. My dad goes, you'll finish the course, you're not getting that tattoo. That's what I remember about my father.
Yeah.
What made it even funnier, he says, so what I want you to do is be like Lacoste. You see, no tattoos. That's the way I want you to be. So one afternoon, he took his shirt off, and I never realized he had a tattoo on his arm of St. Michael on the side. I never did tell my dad that. He said, do you want to be like Lacoste? See how he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't swear. And then I heard some stories about he got upset one time and he did swear. So I don't know. But I just thought that was really funny because they really place a lot of value on that.
It's like night and day. It's like sometimes I want to believe that the guys in Motley Crue right now are just, drinking whiskey and hanging out a car window. But right now they're probably watching Wheel of Fortune and eating bonbons. But I remember when Elvis Presley, at one point, this is completely irrelevant from everything, but at one point this book came out called Elvis, What Happened? And members of his entourage were saying all these dirty secrets and it came out a couple years before he died, but it was the first time the public really ever got a a sour taste of the Elvis Presley sandwich that was, you know. Frankly, I read that book and I kind of liked him a little bit more as a human being, regardless of what bad things they were saying to him. I'm like, no one's perfect.
Oh yeah.
And if they can do these things and still do the other things, that's the amazing part about it.
Do you know, I never met Elvis Presley. But when we were in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Joe Nolan, the guy that was right behind me checking my parachute out, very good friends. And I remember this. He says, we're going to see Elvis Presley we got a weekend pass. You and I are going. And it's at, what's that home that Elvis was in?
Graceland.
Graceland.
Yeah.
So we're going to visit him. And that's the day that they took all the pass off, because that's when the Russian ships were bringing the missile to Cuba. But it was so funny. That's when I was going to meet Elvis Presley. Now, the other time, when I was with Ed Parker, but something went wrong and I didn't get to meet him. So I guess he liked a couple of the Ed Parker's black belt, and Elvis gave them a car. So I'm always missing out on this thing. But so later on, Dave Hebler became the bodyguard for Elvis Presley.
Dave Hebler's one of the guys that was one of the guys who wrote the book.
And Red West and the West brothers.
Yeah.
But they were the bodyguards. Now, Hebler was the guy that taught me with Chuck Sullivan. So was Ed Parker, Chuck Sullivan. That was my senior. And it was so funny. But then Hebler stopped teaching for Parker, and he became the bodyguard for Elvis Presley.
Yeah. Were you an Elvis fan?
I liked his songs. So I definitely, that would put me as a fan.
Yeah, not the hysterical fans that you hear about. They're like, Elvis is still alive.
No, but
he lives on Mars.
No, he's
with Nixon.
Definitely a talent.
And Bruce Lee.
I think Elvis liked Joe Nolan, because sometimes some people were bothering him one time and bothering his. I think it was his mother or aunt that was living with him in Germany when he was stationed in Germany. And he stopped that. So Elvis sort of liked Elvis. If you do something for him, he's extremely loyal. That's what Joe was saying. That Elvis Presley is very unique. You know, I never got to meet him. You know, and I've always I regretted that. But I liked his music. Like in college, I used to play his music all the time.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, he was famous for many decades. So you know.
Even
still is.
Even when I was in college, one of the ends, Bill Cole, the guy that played in our football team. So his summer job, he says, I had a great summer job. And I said, what'd you do? I got the bodyguard, Elvis. Well, you gotta be kidding. And this is before I went into the military service. I was always missing him by fractions of an inch. I missed all 3 opportunities.
Yeah, but you got to meet Bruce Lee. I never got to meet Bruce Lee.
But that's definitely. See, Mike Stone, who I really admire.
Mike Stone, I know Mike Stone with Priscilla. Yeah.
But Mike Stone was, to me, I really admired. He reminded me of Bruce Lee because they both bounce. In those days, you didn't bounce. Because if you bounce, they said, he's moving like a boxer. So that's just the thinking of that time. It was like the stoic stance like this, creep up, and then side kick and round kick. So in Stone, Bruce Lee at that time were up on their feet, which it was criticized by a lot of Japanese systems because you have that kobayashi stance and you worked with that, so you didn't do that. And then later on, people accepted it. At that time, it wasn't accepted. It goes back a long time. I was just thinking, my memory's not too bad.
No, it doesn't seem so at all.
Worry is sometimes you forget if you don't. And then sometimes when you get older, I think, you can't remember what it was like when you're 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's just like a blur,
Yeah. But, is there, let's go off on something fun. Who was the person that you're just like, holy crap, I got to meet this person?
For me, it was a big thing to meet Alcindor.
Alcindor, who is that?
Lou Alcindor.
Lou Alcindor, or that would be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Okay.
The basketball player.
Right. You're saying
so it's pretty cool,
And you got to be in a movie.
Yeah. And then
same time.
I think the other big thrill I had when I got to meet Steve McQueen, because I like Steve McQueen, and all those guys Bruce Lee taught were pretty good. James Coburn, I think he was sharp, So I sort of looked up to those people because I really thought not only they were actors, just really good people, That's the big thrill in my life, right? But
there's tons of thrills of your life. You've written books, you've been in movies, you're a good human being, and you set a good example for everyone you meet.
Yeah. Speaking of books, a lot of the books that you have written, you've let fall into non-publishing. Do you have any desire to?
Oh, yes. I'm leaving it strictly up to my wife because she runs the show, and I'm just along for the ride.
Has she given you any idea if you're allowed to have books out again?
I think she wants me to.
Oh, okay.
She's made available a lot of videotape now, which some people say it's good. So I think it. Hope it's good enough. I'm always worried because I think you feel very self-conscious when you see yourself and you can't. I noticed that when I made the tape. Oh my gosh, my hands are dropping, and you can tell that I could tell I'm a little bit stiff, but you don't recognize that until you see yourself on videotape, and then you can see all the errors. You don't look like the same.
Well, I've seen a couple of them, and I think they're great personally. Because speaking as a student of yours, one of the things that I remember years ago when we were, not as sponsors of your seminars, there was a certain latitude regarding being able to record you. And I understand exactly why. I don't feel as if somehow we were cheated. But the very fact that we don't have an ongoing record, and it's great that you are now releasing that, because sometimes you have all the parts and then you're missing one or two. And they drive you out of your mind. And I mean, I understand that, like having trained with people and 12 hours with this guy or 5 hours with that guy, because of who you are, you probably got to ask the question as often as you wanted. Sometimes, just being a blip on the screen, you realize sometimes that you go, oh, well, about that thing. And, as you say, sometimes numbers change over time.
Yeah.
And you go, that was the same name, but a different thing last time, right? And, and in fact, I've actually realized that there are times when, when you answer a question I may ask, you're not really answering me. You're answering all the questions that everybody's ever asked regarding that particular question. You sort of, you're talking about the butcher paper that you rolled across the floor. You're talking about with Simo Paula, and you're saying, well, we're going to write down all those possible answers, and you have this huge page. Well, that's what it's like sometimes to talk to you and ask you a question. Because, when you're doing that, beset, what's that follow-up? And you get this sometimes half an hour long answer, and all you want to do is, where do I put my right hand? And you're going, oh. So I know, I just funny because it's having these things, you basically show the information, and the person actually has the ability to go, that's the thing I needed to know right there. Okay. And it may not be right, but at least they're satisfied with the answer. Because sometimes the answer is not always going to be all-encompassing, great emotional thing. It's going to be sometimes that little thing that's sort of like, it's like saying, where do I go from here? And then you can sort of give you that answer that will give them, peace in their heart. And, well, I said, no, I asked the other guy where the bathroom was, and now I'm here and I want to go left or right. I just want to go to the bathroom. So, I mean, that's,
That's funny. Paula makes fun of me. He says, sometimes she goes, and you're explaining, I take my left step at 45, I take right. All I want to know is, do I turn right so I can go to the bathroom?
Just speaking as somebody who's been around for a while, it's funny because once you start explaining something, none of us have the nerve to say, oh gosh, that's not what I wanted to know, because, you've been really nice and you're actually taking a lot of time and energy to explain this to us. So it's like, oh, okay. You ask them this time. But it's great because, the thing that tells us is that you love this material so much that you do, that you can see this pleasure in your eyes. Like, no, I don't mind telling you again. I know I told you 14 times before, but I don't mind telling you a 15th time because it's really important to me that you know, and it's really great. So as a fan, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Something that just popped in my head. Dan, the entire time we were about to do this interview, I'm like, I don't want to be the one to bring up Bruce Lee every 5 minutes, because everyone does that. And I want it to be interesting. But the thing about just knowing you as a human being, as an individual, is just like the world changed. Like when when on his unfortunate passing, he died young, he died suddenly. This wasn't, Bruce has been in a coma for 6 months, expect the worst. This was out of the blue. It was overnight. But then because you're one of the 3 certified instructors under him, all of a sudden, this spotlight is shifted to you, humble, shy Dan Inosanto. My God, what did it take some time to adapt to that kind of attention?
Yeah, you definitely take time to adapt, and sometimes you don't want to accept it. That's why I always try to push as many guys up there, so I don't have to do it. And that's because maybe I want the responsibility of taking a person who's major like him, and then he said, look what he did to this system. He completely destroyed it. I think everyone has that fear, But as far as Bruce Lee's concerned, I never really was as close that way. And I don't want to get that close because it really hurt. I mean, it really hurt. And I think there's a danger where you can get so close. I remember crying from Seattle, and I drove back all the way, and I didn't stop crying until Sacramento. So that's Seattle, Portland, Grants Pass, Mount Shasta. And I remember I stopped crying, and I got in the rest and was kind of embarrassed, and I just started bawling and crying. But when a guy is really close to you, you miss that person. I felt that way with Larry Hartzell, but I felt it more with Bruce Lee. I don't think because we were so close, and because he's not perfect. He definitely isn't perfect, but I think with him, because we were so close, and I think that Taki Kimura was his best friend, but my best friend was Bruce Lee. I may not have been his best friend. I might be maybe number 2 or possibly even number 3, but I know we were close because he would tell me things that he would never tell anybody else, and he definitely was not perfect, because I can tell you different things, but I'm not going to tell you different things. But
that's why you're one of his best friends, man.
Pretty much, and then to be thrust on the responsibility, I don't think you want it. Our personalities are much different. He's more outgoing, but yet he's very reserved for people he didn't know. I'm more withdrawn, I think, and so I had to learn how to face. I used to be so afraid of the public. I remember giving a speech class in college, and it was supposed to be a 3-minute speech, and I practiced in my dorm. And when I got up there, I was just so scared. I did my 3-minute speech in 45 seconds. I remember my speech teacher going, "Whoa, that works for track and field, Dan, but it doesn't work. It doesn't work when you're giving a speech. You got to learn to slow down." And it's a learning experience, I think.
Well, Dan, thank you very much for sitting down with us. Thanks for sharing so much.
Okay, thank you.
And this is.
Hope you don't have to edit the whole thing.
Oh no, my God.
Certain parts will be edited.
Oh yes.
When I asked Simo, one of the things I told her was I didn't want you to feel that there was any worry that something that you said or did would be somehow, we're not going to hold up and go, yes, look. So no, we love you. We like you. We respect you. And, if I was to be able to say, look what I did, I would have the rest of my life to rue the fact that you would think less of me as a human being.
Okay.
No, I mean, I don't say that.
That's not going to happen.
No, but I don't say that in a casual way. I say that because, your opinion of me is really important, and you don't realize how important your opinion of a lot of people is to them, because it's not like, oh no, I won't be able to live without it. I say no, but when you know somebody who is such a good heart, and it's kind of like, when instructors say, I'm no longer going to support you, people go like, oh, well, yeah, right, because they've already stepped away. But it's kind of like, when your parents go, Philip, you've disappointed me. And they don't give you any shit on top of that. They just say those 3 words, you've disappointed me, and that's enough to make you crestfallen for a long time. And you work really hard to do it.
And you're like, please ground me, do something. End this tension.
So no, I mean, I just want you to know that, with this whole thing, as I said, it was never meant to make you ever rue the fact that you did this. And we will try to make sure that what your words will be on this podcast, I guarantee will be your words. I wouldn't want you to ever feel that you would worry about being honest with us because you would worry about what we would do with that information.
I'm sure you're going to do the right thing with the information. I just hope I gave you the right information.
Yeah.
Well, no, there's no wrong information.
On a Jerry Springer final thought. If there's ever a part of you, and I don't think there is, because you're just not that type of guy, that ever thinks it's like, your association with Bruce Lee is just out of love, out of your memories. but in my opinion, you were never in a shadow in any sort of way, and I knew you for my whole life without even really associating with him until I saw Game of Death today about 6 hours ago. So good on you, Dan. I don't even think I've even heard you say his name until today.
Oh, really?
And I've known you for 30 years. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Well,
I gotta say, you're quite a man, Dan, and thank you very much for being our guest of honor on our show.
Appreciate it.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
This show has brought us together a lot closer as father and son, and right now I'm glad that we shared this conversation because now I feel closer to you too. So on behalf of all the students at Gamma and everyone else who came in the city just to see you today, we're all very thankful for your wisdom, your knowledge, and your giving nature with the knowledge that you have.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dan.
Thank you.
All right, this is Tuhon Son, possibly the longest episode of all time. I'm Ryan Gelinas,
And I'm the Tuhon, the dad.
and say your name, Dan.
I'm Dan Inosanto.
And
And he has way more titles than you could probably fit in a whole episode of Tuhon and Son, so we won't go into that.
all right, thank you. Good night.